Have you ever stood in your own child's beautiful new house and felt, all at once, that you were the only person there who did not know the truth? That was the exact feeling in my chest when my wife grabbed my wrist, leaned close, and whispered, "Sam, do not say a word in this house. Just get me to the car." And before this story opens its darkest door, do me one favor right now. If you enjoy slow-burn family stories that hit hard at the end, tap like, subscribe, and share this with one person who loves calm voices and shocking turns. My name is Samuel Porter. I am 68 years old. I spent most of my life building Porter freight and cold storage from one used truck and a leaky warehouse into a business that now moves food, medicine, and equipment across half the Midwest. I know engines, numbers, weather, overtime sheets, and people. I know what tired honesty looks like on a worker's face at 5 in the morning. I know what risk feels like when payroll is due and 3 clients are late. What I did not know, at least not that evening, was what betrayal looks like when it is wearing a tailored suit, smiling for guests, and pouring champagne under warm designer lights. My wife Ellen and I had given our only son, Nathan, every advantage we could afford. Not every luxury. I'm not proud of spoiling people, but every real chance, yes. We paid for his school. We helped with his first condo after college. We paid more than half of his wedding to Chloe. And 6 weeks before that party, I wired $1,100,000 to help them close on what Nathan called their forever home. That phrase matters to older parents. Forever home. You hear those words and you stop thinking about granite counters and heated floors. You start seeing Sunday dinners. You start seeing grandchildren running down a hallway. You start seeing framed school pictures, muddy shoes at the back door, holiday lights, safe years, ordinary years, all the years that matter more than money. That was the picture in my mind when Ellen and I drove through the iron gates that Saturday night. The house sat high on a wooded rise outside Lake Forest, wide stone front, black window frames, a curved drive, trimmed hedges that looked too perfect to be real. There were at least 20 cars parked along the circle and down the lane. Not normal cars either. New German sedans, glossy SUVs, a little Italian thing so low I wondered how it even crossed speed bumps. A valet jogged over in gloves and a fitted black coat. 2 caterers were carrying silver trays through the front door. A violin arrangement drifted out into the night. The place looked less like a home and more like a scene built to announce something. Inside, the air smelled like polished wood, white lilies, expensive perfume, and the kind of money that wants witnesses. A lot of people in that house were smiling too hard. Nathan saw us enter. I expected that warm, slightly embarrassed grin children still give their parents even when they are grown. Instead, he gave us a quick lift of the hand from across the foyer, then turned away before I could even step toward him. Chloe appeared in front of him almost instantly, touching his arm, steering him toward a group near the staircase. That was the first small crack. The second came from Chloe's mother. Vivian Cross was standing in the center of the entrance hall like she was cutting a ribbon at a museum opening. She had one hand on a crystal glass, the other moving through the air as if the entire house had bloomed from her own taste and genius. Vivian had always carried herself like a woman, born for larger rooms than the ones life gave her. She liked long stories about private clubs, old family names, market timing, and the kind of social circles that always seem to exist just beyond anyone's ability to verify them. I have never trusted people who talk more about status than work. She drifted toward us in a gold dress that flashed under the lights. "Samuel Ellen," she said, stretching my name into 2 smooth syllables. "Isn't it divine? The stonework alone took weeks to perfect. I told Chloe the house needed authority." I looked at her and nodded politely. "It's a beautiful place." She smiled at that in a way that suggested I had confirmed something important about her. Then she called a waiter over and told him the oysters were circulating too slowly. "Not requested, ordered." I took a glass of sparkling water and stood near the kitchen opening, watching. Nathan kept moving, but not in the easy way of a happy host. He moved like a man trying not to be cornered. He straightened his cuffs too much. He checked his phone too often. Twice he looked in my direction, and both times he looked away almost before our eyes met. I know my son. I know his proud face, his irritated face, his tired face, even his fake polite face. That night I saw something worse. Fear. Not panic, not yet. But fear. Ellen had been gone maybe 6 minutes when she appeared. Ed at my side, and clamped her fingers around my sleeve hard enough to bunch the fabric. Her face had changed color. "Sam," she whispered, still smiling for the room, "we need to leave right now." I stared at her. What happened? Not here. Did someone say something to you? Please, she said, now. In 41 years of marriage, my wife has spoken to me in many tones. Tender, angry, tired, playful, sharp enough to stop me from saying something foolish in public, but I had never heard that tone. It was fear carrying discipline. We did not say goodbye. We did not find Nathan. We did not take dessert or pretend to remember another engagement. We simply moved toward the front door with the bland, calm speed of two people who knew that if they hurried too openly, someone might notice. The cold air hit us halfway down the stone steps. I opened the passenger door and Ellen got in fast. By the time I rounded the hood, she had already locked her side. That scared me more than anything. I sat in the driver's seat but did not start the engine. I turned to her. "Tell me." She kept staring through the windshield for a few seconds. Her breathing was shallow. Then she said, "You told me the money was for Nathan and Chloe's house." "It was." "You told me the title work was handled through their attorney." "Yes." "You did not personally review the final deed, did you?" My stomach tightened. I saw the early paperwork. I saw their names during the process. "Why are you asking me like that?" She swallowed. "Because their names are not on the deed hanging in that house." I felt my hands harden on the steering wheel. "What do you mean hanging in that house?" The downstairs powder room was busy. I went upstairs. At the end of the hall there is a study. The door was open. Vivian was inside with 3 women. They were drinking wine and laughing. On the wall behind the desk in a frame was the property deed. I said nothing, I only listened. Ellen turned to me. I walked closer because I thought it was odd to frame something like that. I pretended I was admiring the room. "Sam," I read the names. "Nathan and Chloe," I said, because I needed to hear myself say it. She shook her head. "No," she whispered. "The property belongs to a trust, Cross Harbor Residential Trust, and the trustee listed under it is Vivian Cross." For a moment, the car felt sealed in concrete. I looked past the windshield at the warm lights of the house. People were laughing inside. Tiny silhouettes passed behind tall glass windows. My money had helped raise those walls. My wife and I had walked in there carrying pride, maybe even relief that our son had landed softly in life. And now my wife was telling me we had not helped Nathan buy a home. We had helped Chloe's mother take one. "You are sure?" I asked, though I already knew she was. "I saw the county seal. I saw the filing date. I saw Vivian's name, Sam." There are moments when anger explodes. This was not one of them. This was colder. It was the kind of anger that steps back, sits down, and begins adding. I started the car. We drove home in silence except for one short sentence from Ellen when we passed the gates. "If Nathan knows," she said quietly, "then this is not a misunderstanding." No, it would not be. That night I did not sleep. I sat in my study with the desk lamp on and my reading glasses low on my nose, clicking through the county records portal with a patience I usually reserve for freight claims and tax filings. Public records do not care about feelings. They do not soften. They do not explain. They simply sit there and tell you what is true. Within 12 minutes, I found the filing. Cross Harbor Residential Trust. Trustee, Vivian Elaine Cross. Property, the full address of the house. I kept going. The trust itself had been created less than a month earlier. I pulled the corporate and trust formation documents that were visible through state registration records. The mailing address listed for trust correspondence was not Nathan's office, not the house, and not Chloe's law firm. It was a private mailbox service 40 miles south. That is the kind of detail honest people do not use for family homes. I printed everything and laid it in a stack. Ellen came in around 1 in the morning in her robe, saw the pages, and sat across from me without a word. "He knew," I said. Her eyes filled, but she nodded, "Yes." I picked up one page. This trust was formed 11 days after I wired the money. "I'm sorry," she said. I looked at her. For what? For being right. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. Parents are not destroyed in one swing. It happens in layers. First the surprise, then the denial, then the scramble to build innocent explanations, then the sick knowledge that each new fact makes innocence more expensive to believe. Maybe Nathan was tricked. Maybe he signed things he did not understand. Maybe Chloe and Vivian managed it behind him. Maybe. But there was one problem with all those maybes. Nathan worked as chief operations officer at my company. He negotiated lease terms, reviewed equipment finance, and signed vendor contracts every week. He was not a fool. He knew what ownership looked like. He knew what names on paper meant. He knew what a trust was. By dawn, my grief had turned into a plan. I would confront him once. Not with shouting. With paper. If he lied, then I would know I was no longer dealing with a son caught in something. I would be dealing with a man building something. And if you can already feel how deep this goes, press like, subscribe, and share this story with someone who loves when quiet people stop being easy to fool. At 7:40 the next morning, I walked into Porter Freight headquarters through the side employee entrance the way I used to 30 years ago. Same concrete floors near receiving. Same smell of diesel residue, coffee, copier toner, and cardboard. Men were clocking in. One forklift battery alarm beeped from the dock. A few people nodded at me with surprise. I nodded back and kept walking. Nathan's office sat at the far end of the second-floor operations wing. Glass wall on one side, framed degree on the other. A desk too sleek for my taste. He was inside alone, jacket off, tie loosened, coffee in hand, looking at a shipping delay report on his screen. He looked up and smiled with visible effort. "Dad, early for a Sunday." I closed the door behind me. "Sit down," I said. He blinked once, not because of the words, because of the tone. I laid the county printouts on his desk, one by one, face up. He looked down. The color in his face thinned. He did not touch the papers. I said, "Would you like to tell me why the house I helped you buy belongs to Vivian's trust?" For a second I saw raw fear. Then, almost impressively fast, training took over. He leaned back, exhaled, and folded his arms like a man slightly annoyed that an older relative had wandered into a conversation he did not fully understand. "Dad," he said, "is this why you left last night?" I did not answer. He continued, "You found the trust filing and assumed the worst. Answer the question." "It's an asset protection structure." He said it smoothly. Too smoothly. I stared at him. Nathan sighed as if I had put him in an exhausting position. "Look, Chloe's legal team and their estate planning attorney recommended a temporary trust wrapper because of transfer exposure, tax timing, and liability shielding, while renovations and occupancy status were being finalized. Vivian agreed to serve as temporary trustee because her personal schedule was more flexible, and she could sign quickly while Chloe was tied up at the firm." The trust dissolves once the closing adjustments and renovation holdbacks clear. Then the title transfers. He slid one of the pages toward himself and tapped a line near the filing date like a teacher helping a distracted student. It's not theft, Dad, it's sequencing. There are lies made from panic. Then there are lies made from rehearsal. This was rehearsal. Not because I did not understand what he was saying, because I understood it too well. I have spent decades around lawyers, lenders, insurers, auditors, and men who hide greed behind vocabulary. Fancy language does not become truth just because it arrives in complete sentences. You're telling me, I said, that over $1 million from my wife and me went into a house controlled on paper by your mother-in-law, and you thought that was a normal arrangement not worth mentioning. He spread his hands. I thought if I explained it before the structure was complete, you'd react exactly like this. I almost laughed at the nerve of it. You mean like a man who notices his money bought another person's house? His jaw flexed. Before he could answer, the office door opened and Chloe walked in carrying 2 coffees and a paper tray with pastries. She stopped when she saw me. Oh, she said, I didn't know you were here. No, I said. I imagine there are several things I didn't know. She set the tray down slowly. Nathan did not look at her, which told me they had already learned to communicate under stress without needing words. Chloe took a breath and stepped into the performance. Samuel, she said, using my full name the way people do when they want distance while pretending respect. If this is about the title structure, Nathan explained last night that you were upset. Nathan explained no such thing last night because he never found time to speak to me. Her face tightened, just a flicker. Then she recovered. Fine, then I'll say it clearly. You made a generous gift. We organized the purchase in the most legally efficient way based on professional advice. That is all. A gift, I said. Yes. I looked at Nathan. Did you call it a gift when you asked me for it? He said nothing. That silence mattered more than anything Chloe had said. She crossed her arms. This is exactly why Nathan didn't W. And to go into the details, Samuel. You attach control to every dollar you hand over. You say you want him to build his own life, but the moment he does something differently than you would have done it in 1987, you act like you've been robbed. I let her finish. People who are lying often need you to defend yourself. It helps them reposition. So I did not defend myself. I only said, how long until the title transfers out of Vivian's trust? Soon, Nathan said. How long? He hesitated. 90 days, maybe less. Maybe less. That phrase is what cowards say when they want flexibility later. I nodded very slowly, like an old man trying to catch up. Then I did something that surprised both of them. I softened. I let my shoulders drop. I rubbed my temple. I looked tired. Maybe I came in too hot, I said. Chloe relaxed first. Nathan followed. I looked at the printouts and then back at my son. I'm not saying I like this. I don't. But if the title is moving to you and Chloe wants the trust work clears, then I suppose I let my imagination run ahead of me. Nathan leaned forward. Exactly. I held up a hand. I'm still unhappy you didn't tell me. That's fair, he said quickly. Chloe added, we were going to. Of course, I said. I gathered half the papers but left the rest spread on his desk, as if I had simply lost the energy to keep pushing. Nathan was watching me closely now, measuring whether I had fully bought it. I gave him what he wanted to see. A tired father. A little embarrassed. A little out of step. Your mother got scared, I said. So did I, that's all. Nathan stood and came around the desk. He put a hand on my shoulder. It's okay, Dad, really. I nodded. Then, as I turned to leave, I noticed something reflected faintly in the dark glass wall behind him. His computer screen. On it, a folder window was open. He clicked fast, too fast for someone relaxed. A directory disappeared into trash. I did not catch every word in the folder name, but I caught enough. Reserve Bridge. I left without reacting. The hallway outside his office suddenly felt colder than the parking lot had the night before. Reserve Bridge. That was not house paperwork. That was cash movement language. Back in my own office, I shut the door and sat down without taking off my coat. I replayed every second. Nathan had not acted insulted enough for an innocent man. Chloe had leaned too quickly into the language of gifts and control. And Reserve Bridge sat in my mind like a nail. At lunch, I called one person I still trusted with the parts of a business that numbers alone never reveal. Grace Nolan. Grace had served as Porter Freight's outside forensic auditor during an acquisition fight 8 years earlier. I liked her because she was calm, unsentimental, and almost impossible to charm. She had the gift of hearing a polished explanation and then asking one plain question that caused the whole thing to collapse. She answered on the second ring. Grace Nolan. It's Sam Porter. A beat. You sound like a man who found termites in a load-bearing wall. Close enough. She listened without interrupting while I laid out the house, the trust, the confrontation, and the folder name. When I finished, she said, "Do you want truth, reassurance, or legal theater?" Truth. Good. Reassurance is more expensive. When can you meet? Tonight, 7 and Sam. Yes. If your son is moving money and hiding ownership, stop treating this like a family misunderstanding. Families cry. Schemes document. That sentence stayed with me. Schemes document. Grace met Ellen and me in a private booth at a quiet steak place near the interstate, the kind of place traveling salesmen like because nobody remembers seeing them there. She was in a navy blazer, no jewelry except a watch, hair pulled back, legal pad unopened until we had covered the human side. When I finished again, with Ellen adding details about what she had seen upstairs, Grace asked 3 questions. 1. Did the $1.1 million come from your personal account or from a business distribution? Personal, but the wire routed through my family office holding account. 2. Does Nathan have signing access to any operational reserves or employee retention funds? Yes, with controls. Controls designed by whom? Me, updated by him. 3. Has anyone lately suggested you should slow down, step back, rest, hand over more authority, anything like that? I looked at her. Why? She met my eyes. Because if the house is a visible lie, there may be an invisible one built to support it. Ellen straightened. What kind of invisible lie? Grace tapped the table once. Capacity, judgment, decision-making. Older founders are often easiest to isolate after they are first painted as emotional, rigid, forgetful, or unstable. If someone is moving money in a way that cannot stand scrutiny, they often prepare an explanation for why the real owner shouldn't be believed. My chest tightened. Nathan had called M.E. emotional that morning. Chloe had framed me as controlling and old-fashioned. Individually, those comments meant nothing. Together, they sounded like groundwork. Grace agreed to start quietly. She would not touch company systems yet. First, she wanted public filings, vendor registration checks, insurance certificates, mailbox records, trust paperwork, and any vendor names Nathan had newly brought into operations over the last year. Give me 48 hours, she said, and do not confront him again. If he's dirty, pressure makes people erase. If he's careless, calm makes people lazy. The next morning, I decided to do something I disliked very much. I went back to the house. Not to fight. To observe. I bought a crystal bowl from a downtown gallery on the way, wrapped in silver paper with a small card that said, "Sorry for overreacting. Wanted a fresh start." A prep. The front gate was open when I arrived. Landscaping crews were out back. A delivery van from an interior design firm was parked by the garage. I rang the bell once, but before anyone answered, I heard voices through the side hall and stepped inside because the door had not fully latched. Vivian's voice carried clearly. "No, not there. Move it 2 inches left. Do I have to supervise every basic task myself?" I followed the sound into the great room and stopped just before the opening. Nathan was on one knee beside a rug, adjusting a brass coffee table by hand, while Vivian stood above him holding a tape measure and a cup of tea. He looked exhausted, not the natural tiredness of moving into a new place. The hollow, brittle fatigue of a man living under someone else's weather. "Too far," Vivian snapped. "Honestly, Nathan, if taste could be taught, you would still fail the course." "Yes, Vivian," he muttered. "Not that's enough. Not this is my house." "Yes, Vivian." I stepped forward, then saw my shoes hit the stone. They all turned. Chloe came in from the kitchen with 2 folders in hand and froze when she saw me. Vivian blinked once, then recovered into a sweet smile. Nathan stood up too fast. "Dad," he said. I lifted the wrapped gift a little. "I came to apologize properly." Vivian looked at the package. "That's more like it." I ignored the wording and handed it to the nearest console table instead. "I spoke too sharply yesterday," I said in my mildest voice. "This all moved fast. I don't like confusion where family and money meet." Chloe exchanged a quick glance with Nathan. "Thank you," she said. "That means a lot." Nathan still looked uneasy. "You didn't have to come all the way out." "Maybe I did," I smiled faintly. "Your mother hated how we left." Vivian waved one elegant hand. "Water under the bridge." Bridge. There was that word again. I turned to Nathan. "Quick question while I'm here. Has the distribution center insurance renewal gone out yet? I noticed the South Bend property rider expires next month." It was a simple, operational question. Nathan would normally answer it in his sleep. But before he could open his mouth, Chloe cut in. "He's not working right now, Samuel. I'm just asking." "And I'm just saying," she replied, firmer now. "Work talk can wait. We're trying to enjoy the house." I kept my eyes on Nathan, not her. He looked at the floor and said quietly, "We can talk Monday." Vivian let out a tiny laugh. "Really, Samuel, do you people ever rest?" "You people." That phrase told its own story. I nodded as if I deserved the correction. "Fair enough. Mind if I use the bathroom before I head out?" "Down the hall," Chloe said. I took the hall, and halfway down it, I saw the study Ellen had mentioned. The door stood open. The room smelled like leather, perfume, and new paper. The deed still hung framed behind the desk, plain as daylight, Vivian's trust named in clear lettering for anyone close enough to read. There was nothing subtle about it. It was not hidden because they did not believe it needed to be. That kind of arrogance grows from success, or from feeling protected. On the desk sat 3 open sample books from an interior design firm, a silver letter opener, and a stack of envelopes. In the wastebasket beside the desk were torn pieces of thick paper that had missed the liner. One scrap showed a logo, Sterling Shore Private Credit. Another scrap showed the bottom of a sentence, "Failure to cure default may trigger immediate enforcement." I crouched lower and found one more piece under the rim. This one had just enough text to matter. Borrower Vivian E. Cross. Not casino debt, not yet, but debt. Big debt. Urgent debt. I put every scrap back exactly as I found it and left the room. When I returned to the great room, Vivian was lecturing a florist about peonies and visual balance. Nathan stood with both hands in his pockets, eyes dull. Chloe thanked me again for the gift. I told them I was glad we had cleared the air. I did not feel cleared. I felt warned. And if this story has you leaning closer, hit subscribe now, leave a like. And share it with a friend who always says the quiet stories end up being the wildest ones. By Tuesday night, Grace had enough to ask for one more day. By Wednesday afternoon, she called and said, "Come alone." That is never a sentence attached to good news. We met in a rented conference room inside an executive suite building 50 minutes away. Neutral carpet, gray walls, water pitcher untouched. Grace had a laptop open, 3 paper folders arranged by color, and the expression she wears when facts have stopped being surprising and started becoming expensive. She waited until I sat. "What I'm about to say," she began, "needs to stay inside a legal strategy circle until we lock the evidence chain. Understood?" I nodded. She turned the laptop so I could see. At first glance, it looked like ordinary vendor history. Payments, dates, approval initials, memo codes, clean entries. Then Grace zoomed out. Patterns appeared. A consulting vendor named Harbor Ridge Advisory had begun billing Porter Freight 11 months earlier. $32,000 a month, then 38, then 42, always under operational transition support, always approved through a streamlined process that required Nathan and one controller beneath him. What services were they providing? I asked. On paper, process optimization and route integration support. In reality, Grace slid a file to me. No employees, no office, registered agent in Delaware, mailing contact tied to a mailbox center, insurance certificate fabricated, tax forms filed but linked to a bank account opened by a nominee service. I stared at the page. Where did the money go? Through Harbor Ridge, into 2 accounts. One to cover luxury renovation expenses tied to the house, the other into debt servicing channels connected to Sterling Shore Private Credit and a second lender called Blackwater Leisure Finance. Leisure Finance. Private lending for high-risk lifestyle debts. Yachts, gambling markers, property defaults, discrete liquidity, that kind of thing. Vivian. Grace continued, that's not the worst part. She opened a second file. This one traced transfers from an employee retention reserve I had created after the pandemic. It was meant as a buffer to prevent layoffs during sharp downturns and to preserve benefit continuity for long-haul staff. They had bled it. Not all at once, smartly, small enough not to scream, large enough to matter. Classified as temporary intercompany smoothing, then rolled through internal bridge accounts, then disguised under vendor timing adjustments. Reserve bridge. My son had not just helped steal a house. He had reached into money meant to protect workers. I sat very still. How much? Grace looked at me directly. As of last week, 2.8 million. My mouth went dry. I looked down at the spreadsheet. There were names on my mind then. Men who had worked weekends in freezing docks, women in dispatch who stayed through blizzards and freight shortages, drivers with knee braces and blood pressure pills who still showed up before dawn. They trusted that when I said we would protect them, I meant it. And my own son had treated that reserve like a private hose. Can we prove Nathan knew exactly what he was doing? I asked. Yes. Can we prove Chloe? Not yet on the internal transfers, but she is tied to property-side documents and trust communications. Vivian. Debt, pressure, ownership and benefit, yes. Grace tapped the third folder. There is more. I almost did not want there to be. But of course there was. Inside were drafted memos, email extracts, and legal consultation notes that had been captured through metadata caches, public attachment trails, and a compliance mirror one of my older in-house systems still produced before certain file purges. Nathan had not cleaned up as well as he thought. He and Chloe had consulted a private elder law attorney. The phrase capacity review appeared 3 times. So did supervisory transition. So did concern for recent cognitive changes in principle. My skin went cold. Grace slid one page in front of me. This isn't a filed petition yet, but it's a draft outline for temporary authority based on alleged decline. I read the bullet points. Misplaced items. Emotional overreaction to routine business structures. Confusion about modern financial tools. Sleep irregularity. Paranoia regarding family support. They were building a story in which I was no longer a credible witness to my own life. I set the paper down very carefully. Do Ellen and I look like fools to you, Grace? She did not hesitate. No. Then tell me why I still want one clean explanation that lets Nathan come back from this. Because you are a father, she said. That instinct is honorable. It is also exactly what people like this count on. People like this. Not your son. People like this. There is a point where language changes because reality has. I breathed in slow. What do you recommend? Grace answered without drama. First, secure company systems and preserve the evidence without alerting him. Second, move through counsel and law enforcement quietly before he senses exposure. Third, do not let him know you understand the capacity angle. If he believes you suspect it, he'll accelerate or destroy records. I looked at the draft notes again. He had already started drawing a map in which my disagreement became my decline. If I fought him in the obvious way, I would walk straight into it. So I decided to do the least natural thing a proud man can do. I decided to act weaker. That Thursday morning, Nathan came by our house to drop off a bottle of wine and check in. Chloe was with him. Ellen had made tea. The room smelled like cinnamon and lemon polish. Everything looked ordinary. I made it useful. I looked at Nathan and said, "Morning, Ben." His name is not Ben. It was a small mistake, plausible, sad enough to matter, light enough to recover from. Nathan blinked. Chloe's eyes sharpened. "Dad," Nathan said gently, "it's Nathan." I touched my forehead and gave a thin smile. Of course, bad sleep, sorry. No one said anything for half a second. Then Chloe softened her voice. "Maybe you need more rest, Samuel." There it was. Not concern. Collection. That afternoon, I placed my car keys in the pantry on purpose and spent 6 minutes asking Ellen if she had seen them. The next day, I repeated a story at lunch that I had already told over breakfast. Saturday, I asked Nathan whether his college roommate still lived in Denver, even though that roommate had died years earlier in a motorcycle accident. Every time I let the slip seem small, believable and painful. Every time Chloe watched with bright, careful eyes. Nathan began sounding almost comforting. Too comforting. The way a man sounds when reality starts cooperating with his paperwork. Meanwhile, my attorneys moved. System images were preserved. Access logs copied. Internal approvals frozen under a wider compliance pretext. Banking counsel placed quiet holds where they could. Law enforcement was briefed through the proper channel but asked to sit until we had enough for an airtight move rather than a messy family accusation. Then I needed one more thing. Intent. Not just records. Their own words. So I built bait. In my home study, I drafted a document on company letterhead that looked devastatingly real. It was not a full transfer of ownership, but it was enough. A chairman's temporary delegation memo granting Nathan Broad's signature authority pending my rest period, and authorizing him to direct banking communication and internal legal review. To a desperate man, it would look like the first open gate. I left it unsigned in the center of my desk. Next to it, I placed my old fountain pen. And hidden in the bookcase opposite the desk, behind the spine of a cracked atlas, Grace's team installed a pinhole camera linked to an encrypted receiver. That night I made sure Nathan knew I was confused, embarrassed, and thinking maybe it was time to stop fighting change. I said it twice in front of Chloe. I let my hand tremble while I held my coffee. Then Ellen and I left the house through the side entrance after midnight and checked into a small hotel 20 minutes away. We sat in a dark room with the live feed glowing on a monitor. That was the longest hour of my life. Around 1:12 in the morning, my study door eased open. Nathan entered first. Chloe followed. They did not switch on the overhead light. Nathan went straight to the desk lamp, turned it low, and both of them leaned over the paper. He read fast, then slower. Then his face changed. A smile spread across it, but not the kind I had seen on birthdays, graduations, or family trips. This was a private smile, a hungry smile, a smile that only shows up when someone thinks the last obstacle between greed and possession has fallen asleep. Chloe took the page from him. "Oh my God," she whispered, "he really drafted it." Nathan let out a laugh, quiet, disbelieving, almost reverent. "He's finally breaking." Ellen gripped my arm so hard it hurt. Chloe scanned the final paragraph. "This gives you room to handle the accounts before any formal review." Nathan nodded, "Exactly." Then he said the sentence that ended something in me forever. "If he signs this next week, we won't even need the emergency petition first." Emergency petition. There it was in his own mouth. Chloe set the paper down. "I still think we file anyway. Once the reserve issue surfaces, we need him framed as unstable before he can contradict the timeline." My wife made a sound beside me. Not a cry, not yet, a small broken breath. On the screen, Nathan picked up the pen, weighed it in his hand, then set it down again. "No," he said, "not yet. If I forge this and the ink gets tested, it creates risk. Better to let him sign. He's already halfway there. We keep feeding the decline narrative, tell him he deserves peace, tell Ellen it's tempora. Rye, and get him into supervised care after the authority transfer is in place." "Ellen may resist," Chloe said. Nathan shrugged. "Then we isolate her. Once Dad is under observation, she loses leverage. By then the bank channels are mine, the reserve gap is covered through refinancing, and Vivian gets breathing room." Vivian. Breathing room. 2.8 million of employee protection money, and they called it breathing room. Chloe lowered her voice. "And if he changes his mind?" Nathan's answer was soft. "Then we use the petition." He tapped the unsigned memo. "He won't look credible. He's already confusing names. He's forgetting basic things. We've got notes, dates, witnesses. Mom will be emotional. That helps." "That helps." My wife bent forward and covered her mouth. I did not move. On the screen, Chloe leaned closer to Nathan and said, "We are so close." Then the two of them kissed in my study over the paper that would have erased my authority. Not because they loved each other in that moment. Because they loved the future they thought they were stealing. They left 3 minutes later. Ellen finally cried after the door shut behind them on the screen. Not loud, quiet, the saddest kind, the kind grief makes when it is too tired to defend itself. I sat there beside her and felt something inside me settle into stone. Not hatred. Something colder. Completion. And if you've ever seen kindness mistaken for weakness, hit like, subscribe, and share this story now, because the next part is where the mask comes off. From there, everything moved quickly. Grace, my attorneys, and the investigating team spent the next 2 days building the cleanest possible chain. No loose claims, no dramatic leaps, every figure traced, every access log preserved, every private lender linked where possible, every false vendor path mapped. The hotel recording gave us the human center of the scheme. The documents gave us the bones. The money gave us motive. I wanted the final confrontation in a place they had chosen. Their stage, their lights, their audience. That chance came sooner than expected. Vivian announced a formal dinner the following Friday to celebrate the home properly. She invited neighbors, 2 local developers, a banker she liked to name drop, several friends from her charity circles, and this amused me, 3 people from the social set she had always wanted to impress. Nathan called to make sure Ellen and I would come. His voice was almost tender. "Dad, I think it would mean a lot if we reset. Chloe and I hate this tension." Reset. A lovely word when spoken by someone standing on your throat. I told him we would be there. The day of the dinner, Ellen stood in our bedroom fastening a pair of pearl earrings with hands steadier than mine. She had cried, yes, but sorrow had burned down into clarity. "You don't have to go," I told her. She looked at me in the mirror. "Yes, I do. You may hear things tonight you can't unhear." I already heard enough in that hotel room. I walked over and took her hand. She squeezed once. "Let them finish what they started, Sam, then we end it." We arrived at dusk. The house looked even more theatrical than before. Uplighting washed the front trees in amber. 2 valets were working the drive. Through the windows I saw candles and moving shadows and a dining room dressed like a magazine spread. Inside, a string trio played near the staircase. Vivian wore dark green silk and an emerald necklace. She was greeting people with the posture of a woman who believed the house had finally corrected the scale on which life had undervalued her. Nathan looked pale. Not defeated. Not yet. But stretched thin under his own confidence. Chloe moved through the room as if she had practiced every angle. When they saw me, I gave them exactly what I had been giving them all week. A smaller version of myself. I leaned a little harder on my cane than I needed to. I blinked twice before recognizing a guest I had known for years. I let one sentence wander off before finishing it. Chloe looked almost relieved. The banker Vivian liked, Harold from Lake County Community, shook my hand and asked how retirement felt. I smiled vaguely and said, "Some mornings it still feels like 1998. He laughed. Chloe watched. "Good." Before dinner, Vivian decided to perform what she thought was status. She guided a cluster of guests toward the study and opened the door with one hand as if unveiling a gallery room. I stayed back, but I could hear her. "This is where we'll eventually keep the property archive," she said. "I believe a house should remember who made it happen." Who made it happen? Ellen's jaw tightened. I touched her wrist lightly. Soon. We were seated at a long polished table under a chandelier that sprayed light across crystal glasses and silver. Nathan sat across from me, Chloe on his right, Vivian at the far end like a queen at a narrow court. Ellen sat on my left, spine straight, expression calm. The first course passed. In a blur of harmless conversation, travel, wine, schools, market chatter, the second course brought the shift. Vivian lifted her glass and said to the table, "I do hope everyone appreciates how difficult it is to create a home with true harmony. So many people confuse money with taste." A few guests laughed politely. She turned to Ellen with a smile that had a knife inside it. "Though I must say, Ellen, your little casserole at Christmas was charming in its own sturdy way. There's something sweet about women who still cook as if weather hardship might return at any time." Several faces around the table went still. Ellen lowered her fork. I had told myself I would wait for Nathan to make the first move with the authority memo. I had imagined a slower burn, but some lines, once crossed, clarify timing for you. I set down my napkin. No tremor. No confusion. No old man softness. Just stillness. The room felt it before anyone understood it. I turned my head toward Vivian and said, in a voice calm enough to carry to every plate, "The woman you are speaking to built more real value in 1 year of honest work than you have built in your entire life of posing near other people's money." The air changed. Nathan froze. Chloe's hand stopped halfway to her glass. Vivian stared at me, stunned not by the insult alone but by the voice. The voice did not match the man they thought they had prepared to manage. I continued. My wife spent 40 years standing beside me while we built a company, a family, and a reputation from labor, not theater. So you will not use her to decorate your insecurity for another second. Nobody moved. At the end of the table, Vivian's face hardened. "Samuel, I think perhaps you're overtired." "No," I said. "I think perhaps you have mistaken tolerance for blindness." Nathan leaned forward quickly. "Dad, maybe we should take a minute." "No, you've had many minutes." His eyes widened. "Good." Chloe found her voice first. "Samuel, this is not the time." "You're right," I said. "The time was weeks ago when you took my money under false pretenses, but this room will do." Vivian let out a laugh too sharp to sound natural. "Oh, for heaven's sake." I stood. No cane. No wobble. Nothing. Just a man fully in possession of himself. The room saw it all at once. Nathan's face emptied. I looked at him and asked, "Would you like to tell your guests who owns this house?" Silence. I asked again, "Nathan, who owns this house?" He said nothing. So I answered for him. "The property is held by Cross Harbor Residential Trust, controlled by Vivian Cross, not by my son, not by his wife, not by anyone at this table who pretended last week to be celebrating young homeowners." A murmur went around the room like wind under a door. Vivian rose halfway from her chair. "That is a temporary legal." I cut her off. "Save the elegant phrases, I have the filings." Chloe spoke next, faster now. "You are taking a standard protective structure and twisting it because you've been emotional from the start." I turned to her. "No, Chloe. What's twisted is using a trust to conceal control, false vendors to move money, and draft capacity paperwork to prepare a story in which I can no longer be believed." Nathan went white. Not pale. White. Vivian looked from him to Chloe, suddenly calculating whether the room could still be won. It could not. I reached into my jacket and placed 3 copies of a summary packet on the table, one in front of Nathan, one in front of Chloe, one in front of Vivian. No dramatics. Just paper. "In those pages," I said, "you will find the trust records, the Harbor Ridge Advisory Payment Trail, the reserve transfers, and the debt links tying company money to private obligations and renovation expenses on this property." Harold the banker did not touch his wine. Across the table, one of Vivian's friends whispered, "My God." Nathan tried to speak. "Dad, I can explain." "No," I said, "you can confess later." Then I turned slightly toward the archway. "Now." That single word brought movement. 2 men in dark suits entered first, followed by Grace, then my attorney, then 2 investigators who had been waiting in the front sitting room until I gave the signal. The room broke into shocked sounds. Vivian sat down hard. Chloe's breath caught. Nathan looked at the door, the way trapped animals do. My attorney stepped forward and said, with perfect clarity, "Mr. Nathan Porter, You are suspended from all duties at Porter Freight effective immediately pending formal termination for cause. You are instructed not to access any company systems, accounts, devices, or facilities. Nathan actually laughed once, not from humor, from panic. You can't do that here. I already have, I said. Grace laid a sealed evidence folder in front of him. System images, payment trails, approval logs, and preserved communications say otherwise. Chloe stood abruptly. This is insane. You ambushed us in our home. Your home, I said. I took out one line. Sent document. Not the false delegation memo. The real one. The notice our counsel had prepared that morning. This property, I said, was acquired through funds induced by misrepresentation and subsequently improved through money rooted from a fraudulent vendor stream tied to Porter Freight reserves. A civil claim, freeze notice, and occupancy injunction are already in process. You are not secure here, not financially, not legally, and not socially. Vivian's hand began to shake. You can't seize a private residence over a misunderstanding, she said. This isn't a misunderstanding, I replied. It's a structure. Then I looked directly at Nathan and decided to say the sentence he had most earned. You stole from the people I promised to protect. His mouth opened, but no sound came. That was the moment I saw it. Not regret. Not shame. Only collapse. Because some people never feel bad for the wound. They only feel bad when they lose the knife. And if you've stayed with me this far, tap like, subscribe, and send this to someone who appreciates a story where the truth walks in wearing dress shoes and carrying documents. One of the investigators stepped closer to Vivian. Ma'am, he said, we need you to come with us for questioning regarding financial transfers and debt-linked disbursements. Her chin jerked up. Do you know who I am? Yes, he said calmly, that's part of the issue. Several guests looked away. Nobody defended her. That is another lesson life teaches late. People love confidence until the receipts arrive. Chloe began crying then, but even through the tears she tried one last angle. She turned to the room, not to me. He's not well, she said, voice breaking on purpose. He's been confused for weeks. He doesn't understand what he's doing. I almost admired the discipline. Even here. Even now. Still building the same story. So I reached into my inner pocket and took out a flash drive, handing it to my attorney. He passed it to the lead investigator and then to Harold the banker, who looked stunned to be included. That, I said, contains a recording from my home study taken 3 nights ago. In it, my son and daughter-in-law discuss obtaining my signature through manipulation, using an emergency capacity petition if needed, and isolating my wife once authority shifts. Nathan lurched to his feet. You recorded us. Yes, I said, in my study, in my house, while you stood over a document designed to strip me of control. The room erupted. Not shouting exactly, more like society learning all at once it has been sitting on rotten floorboards. Chloe sat back down slowly, her crying stopped. Vivian stared at Nathan with pure hatred now, the hatred of a selfish person toward another selfish person whose weakness has become inconvenient. Do something, she hissed at him. There was nothing left for him to do. He looked at me then, and for the first time that night, I saw the boy who used to wait for me in Little League cleats, asking if I could stay after the game and throw a few more pitches. That boy was only there for a second. Then gone again. Dad, he said quietly, please. The word landed in the room like a dropped glass. I answered him in the same calm voice I had used all evening. If you wanted a father tonight, you should have remembered you were a son when you wrote me out of my own life. Ellen rose beside me. My wife did not shout. She did not slap anyone. She simply looked at Chloe and said, "I welcomed you into our family. You listened to my son plan our erasure and called it strategy. Do not ever speak to me again." Chloe lowered her eyes. The investigators asked Vivian once more to come with them. This time she stood, but only because she had understood that the room would not save her. Nathan did not move. He looked broken but not awakened. There is a difference. We left before the scene fully scattered. Not because I was sparing them. Because I had seen enough. Outside, the night air felt astonishingly clean. Ellen and I got into the car. I shut the door. For a long time neither of us spoke. Then she said, "Did we do the right thing?" I started the engine and looked straight ahead. We did the true thing. That week was fire. News moves faster when it contains money, class, fraud, and family. By Monday afternoon, Porter Freight had a public statement drafted, reserve restoration plans underway, and an external oversight review announced. My personal legal team and our board authorized an immediate capital injection from my holdings to refill every dollar taken from the Employee Protection Reserve. That was the first thing I cared about. Not reputation. Not headlines. Workers. I stood in the main warehouse 2 days later on a wooden platform near Dock 3 and told them the truth. Not every lurid detail, but enough. I told them money set aside for stability had been diverted. I told them it had been restored in full. I told them no benefits would be lost, no protections cut, no pensions touched, and no worker would pay for the sins of my family. Some people cried. Some just crossed their arms and nodded once. One old dispatcher named Ruth came up after and said, "I believed you'd make it right. I just hated not knowing if you still could." That sentence cut me deeper than any insult from Vivian ever had. Because that was the real damage. Not only theft. Shaken trust. I repaired what I could. Nathan was charged later than people expected because the case needed to be built correctly. Chloe was not let out in handcuffs that night because her role required slower legal stitching. Vivian, however, was finished socially the moment creditors and investigators began circling in daylight. Her calls stopped getting returned. Her charity positions vanished. The women who once stood too close to hear her stories now crossed streets to avoid being seen with her. None of that gave me pleasure. Pleasure is too bright a word. It gave me confirmation. The house was frozen in dispute. Designers removed their sample books. Deliveries stopped. The fountains were shut off. Lights went dark room by room as utilities, staffing, and service contracts collapsed. For 2 weeks I still expected my phone to ring with some last explanation from Nathan that would sound like a human being trying to climb back toward moral ground. It never came. Only messages through counsel. Only attempts to reduce, reinterpret, soften. He blamed pressure, Vivian marriage stress, timing gaps, accounting complexity. Anything but choice. Then winter came early. Ellen and I had moved by then into a smaller house we had bought years earlier as an investment property and never used. One floor, deep porch, maple trees, a modest kitchen Ellen loved immediately because it had a window above the sink looking out over a small back garden. We slept better there. Not perfectly, but better. Late one Thursday, a freezing rain began tapping the windows. By 10 it had become a full storm. Wind pushed sleet against the porch rail. The gutters rattled. Ellen had gone to bed early with a book. I was in the living room by the fire when the doorbell rang. Once, twice, then pounding. I stood up slowly because I already knew. Some instincts come from fear. This one came from pattern. I opened the door. Nathan stood there soaked through, hair plastered to his head, face hollow, coat missing, one hand bruised across the knuckles. He looked older by 10 years and smaller by 20. He did not say hello. He said, "Dad, please." The storm blew rain into the entry behind me. I did not step aside. "What do you want?" His lips trembled. "I need to come in just for a little while." "No." He closed his eyes at once, as if he had expected the answer but still hoped gravity might change its mind for him. "Please listen," he said. "Everything fell apart. Chloe left. Vivian won't answer the lawyers. The lawyers answer when you pay them." He looked down. "My accounts are frozen." "Then your accounts are frozen." He took a breath that shook on the way out. "I know I don't deserve kindness." That was the first honest sentence he had spoken in weeks. Then he ruined it. "But you don't understand how much pressure I was under." There it was. Always the door back to blame. I felt something inside me cool all the way through. "I understand exactly," I said. "You were under enough pressure to reveal who you are." He looked at me as rain ran from his jaw. "I never wanted it to go this far." "Then you should have stopped before you moved reserve money." He flinched. "I thought I could put it back." "With what?" He had no answer. I kept my voice level. "You took money meant to protect people who trusted me. You stood in my study and discussed how to strip me of authority. You helped build a story in which I was too unstable to defend myself. And now you're at my door in the rain wanting me to make your consequences warmer." He began to cry. Real tears this time. Ugly, exhausted, frightened. "I'm still your son." I looked at him for a long moment. Blood is powerful. Memory is powerful. The sound of your child crying can wake instincts older than reason. But truth matters too. And truth was standing wet on my porch, still trying to place the heaviest weight somewhere other than his own shoulders. "You are my responsibility from the past," I said, "not my future." He stared at me as if the sentence had struck him. "Please," he whispered, "just let me sleep in the garage." "No. Dad. No." He took one step forward, not aggressive, just desperate. I raised my hand. He stopped. Behind me, I could sense Ellen at the end of the hallway, though she said nothing. She trusted me to finish this. So I did. "I gave you education, work, access, trust, and more money than my own father ever saw in one place. I would have helped you through failure. I would have helped you through debt. I would have helped you through a bad marriage, a business mistake, a public embarrassment almost. Anything, but you did not come to me with trouble. You built a machine and fed me into it. That was not weakness. That was decision." Rain hammered the porch roof. Nathan's shoulders shook. I said I was sorry. "No," I replied. "You said you were trapped." He opened his mouth, then closed it. Because he knew I was right. "I hope," I said, "that one day you tell the truth without adding a single excuse after it. When that day comes, maybe you begin being a man again. But you will not begin here by using this house as shelter from a storm you made." I pulled the door closer. His hand lifted halfway, then dropped. "Dad," he said one last time, voice barely there. I looked at him and felt no triumph at all. Only finality. "You needed a father when there was still a son inside your choices," I said. "Good night, Nathan." Then I closed the door. The latch clicked. The deadbolt turned. I stood in the warm hallway listening to the storm and to the faint shape of his steps on the porch. After a few seconds they moved away. Whether he walked to the road or stood there longer, I do not know. I did not look through the glass. Some people hear that part and think it was cruelty. It was not. Cruelty is what he and Chloe planned for me in neat language and low voices. What I did was boundary. And if you believe peace sometimes begins with one hard closed door, hit like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who needs that reminder tonight. The case ground on for months after that, as all serious cases do. Real justice is slower than revenge and less cinematic than people think. There were hearings, motions, negotiations, document productions, statements, compliance reports, insurance reviews, and enough legal paper to fill a trailer. Chloe fought hardest to cast herself as adjacent rather than involved. She claimed she never understood the reserve transfers, that she believed the trust structure was temporary, and that my condition concerned her only because of conversations Nathan initiated. But messages surfaced. Notes, calendar entries, draft questions for a capacity consult. Her role did not disappear. It only narrowed. Vivian, by contrast, remained exactly who she had always been. Even under scrutiny, even while cornered, she acted as though outrage itself might restore rank. She called investigators rude, lenders predatory, former friends cowardly, and the system jealous. She could not imagine a world in which the mirror reflected her accurately. Nathan's posture changed more than his substance did. He grew quieter, less polished, less sure of his own story. But whenever he got close to accountability, he still reached for whether pressure, manipulation, marriage, expectations, inheritance, timing, anything but the plain sentence. I chose. That sentence never came. At Porter Freight, I made changes I should have made years earlier. No family member would ever again hold unilateral access across reserve categories. Approval chains were rebuilt. Audit triggers were lowered. Outside review became permanent. I stopped assuming love was a control environment. That may be the most expensive lesson I ever learned. Ellen and I grew smaller in the ways that matter. Smaller house, smaller table, smaller guest list. But life felt larger. We began taking evening walks after dinner even when it was cold. We learned the neighborhood dogs by name. On Sundays, Ellen baked bread and I read in the chair by the window while snow or rain or spring sun did whatever it wanted outside. Sometimes we talked about Nathan. Sometimes we did not. One afternoon in March, Ellen asked me, "Do you miss the son you had?" I thought about it for a long time. "Yes," I said finally, "but I think I may be missing a hope more than a person." She nodded because she understood exactly. That is another thing age teaches, if you are willing to learn it. Sometimes grief is not only for what happened. Sometimes it is for what you kept believing long after the evidence changed. Months later, I visited the old frozen house one last time with counsel present because certain contents needed inventory. The driveway was cracked with winter salt. The front beds were dead. A shutter hung crooked near the garage. Inside, the rooms echoed. Without staff, music, scent, and guests, the place felt what it always had been to me once the lie lifted. Not a home. A stage set for appetite. In the study, the framed deed was gone. Only the pale rectangle remained on the wall where sunlight had not touched the paint. I stood there for a while. Then I laughed softly once. Not at them. At the silliness of the symbol. People frame what they fear losing. I left the room and did not go back. A year has passed since the night my wife gripped my wrist in our son's new house and told me we had to leave. If you had asked me then what would hurt most, I would have said the money, or the public humiliation, or the shock of learning our son had lied. I would have been wrong. What hurt most was not discovering that greed existed. Greed is old. What hurt most was realizing how calmly greed can study your habits, your affection, your blind spots, and your decency, then dress itself like family until the moment it asks you to sign away your own voice. That is why I tell this story the way I do. Not fast, not loud, because the dangerous things in life are often quiet first. They begin with small evasions. A title you did not read. A sentence that makes you feel old. A joke at your expense that doubles as a note for later.